And delighted to say Commentator Sam Armstrong has agreed not to leave the studio. I mean, he keeps trying, but actually we just do the locks and he can't get out until 1 o'clock. And he joins us every Monday morning.
Good morning.
I mean, it is a good morning because there's an awful lot to talk about. My God, I mean, the news. Let's start again with Hadush Gerberslasie, a man whose name I never wished I needed to know. I never needed to hear about him again after he was in the country for a matter of weeks before. On 7th of July, he sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl, and the woman who tried to stop him sexually assaulting the 14-year-old girl, saying, you know, well, I want to have your, you know, you can have my babies. Yeah, because that's a normal thing to say to a schoolgirl. I mean, I had a 14-year-old. I know what 14-year-olds look like. I mean, she was in her school uniform. There were clues, right? 8th of July, he was arrested. He was convicted and then sentenced on the 23rd of September to a year behind bars. 3.5 months after he was arrested and put on remand, that would count towards his sentence, he was released on Friday, supposed to have been taken to a deportation centre to be sent back home to Ethiopia. Bye-bye, never want to see you again. But instead, he was freed. He hung around for about an hour and a half outside the prison, saying, I don't know where to go. And they eventually said, for God's sake, you know, the train station's over there. This is in Chelmsford. And he went off and he got himself a train, went to London. And then they went, oh, oops. 15 minutes later, he wasn't supposed to be released. And then they spent 2 days, police manhunt, looking for this man, eventually arrested in Finsbury Park in North London on Sunday morning. And now he is going to be deported. Meanwhile, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, is going to face a common grilling today over the wrongly released migrant sex offender. He's not the first. He won't be the last. More than 260, as one of our guests has pointed out earlier, people have been accidentally released. Very high profile, though, so you'd think they'd be a bit more careful. Who's to blame? Whose head should roll, Sam?
I tell you who is not to blame. And the people who are not to blame are the mums in Epping who are representative of people across this country who are concerned. Why are they concerned? Because suddenly a group of men who have nothing in common other than the fact that they broke into this country illegally by paying dangerous criminals to smuggle them here have turned up within their local communities. Once there, they hang around outside, they mosey around public spaces, and they threaten and endanger the safety of people that were here legitimately to begin with. They were told it was racist to believe so, and then lo and behold, somebody that had just turned up in this country goes on what can only be described as a sex rampage.
I don't know. Okay, I mean,
hang on. He went up to one girl, 14 years old, sexually assaults her, goes up to, having been caught, done that, having been in an issue there, he goes and attempts to do it again. And if he had not been arrested,
I've no doubt at all
he would have continued going on and on and on, because everything we know about perpetrators of these kind of crimes is they very, very rarely stop at the beginning level.
I agree with you.
He was arrested, he was sent to prison for just 3.5 months. The public were told he was getting 12 months. Did he? No. 3.5 months later. And then what happens? He goes into Chelmsford prison, a place I know well. I was born in Chelmsford.
I thought we were going to get a little bit of an inkling of what nerves happened in your life in the past, but there we are.
And then at the end of this 3.5 month sentence, which sounds to me like even less than 40% as far as my maths makes sense, that he is released despite the fact that he says to a prison officer repeatedly, you should deport me. The British state has just broken. It has completely and utterly ceased to function, and we have had enough of it. The public deserve far, far more than this.
I mean, the fact that he was saying, like, well, he actually apparently said, I'm supposed to be deported. And of course, he wanted to be deported because we're paying £2,000 for that. He wants to go back to Ethiopia. I mean, I don't know, maybe our 14-year-olds just aren't his type anymore. I don't know. But the whole thing, it's so risible, but it's not unusual. And we say, prison governors said, look, no, this is not unusual. There's incompetence. We've had people sneaking out of prisons. We've had other cases. We know there is a problem in our prison service. There has been a massive underfunding. Basically, you can either be a prison officer and get punched and kicked and possibly stabbed or have boiling water thrown over you, or you can go and do another job that pays more per hour and not face that every day. Who would want to be a prison officer? Thank God some people do agree to do that job, because it's a rotten job these days, and it's very badly paid, and people are very badly supported. But people are off on a mass scale. We have a problem there, but that doesn't excuse this abject incompetence, because it really is. You had one job. You had one job, not to release the man about to be deported.
I completely and utterly agree with you. Prison officers are by and large heroes, but they are led by, look, you can say they're underfunded, but every single prison, certainly HMPPS, the body that runs it at the top, finds enough money to staff an entire diversity department. How about we take all of the staff that are in the diversity or HR functions at the prison service and stick them onto checking whether or not we're releasing dangerous criminals? And who are they expected to be led by? David Lammy. Now, I made fun of him for the last time for getting just about every single answer wrong on Mastermind. I mean, Red Leicester being a blue cheese. Come on. And I don't mean any disrespect, but I am on principle against dumb people running big things. And the Justice Secretary...
David Lammy's a laughingstock to most people.
He is a total and utter laughingstock, and the standards he sets water themselves down into that. As far as I was concerned, last thing I heard of him, he was running a failing radio show. He's now his chief accomplishment as Foreign Secretary appeared to be getting into a dispute with a foreign taxi driver that the British public were going to end up having to pay the tab for.
He ain't covered himself in any glory.
And now he's turned up and he's Deputy Prime Minister.
People are calling for him to be sacked or him to resign, fall on his sword. The thing is, if we literally, I mean, you know, that's like saying the Health Secretary has to resign every time someone dies in a hospital corridor. The reality is our government ministers, whether it's the Health Service, whether it's the Home Office, whether it's the Justice Department, whether it's education, they're literally not in control. This, to me, is one of the biggest problems in the state, is that we have no accountability because we have no one who is in control of anything. The Home Secretary can't control whether the police do or do not arrest people for non-crime hate incidents, for goodness sake. The Health Secretary can't decide whether or not enough people are put on staff to mean that people don't die waiting to be seen by a doctor in A&E. The Education Secretary can't stop schools basically, completely and utterly lying to children about trans issues and things and pushing that agenda. The people who we elect, now whether we vote for them or not, they have a democratic mandate. The people we elect, the people who are in Parliament, the people who are then the majority party in government, have no control of anything. The civil servants are in charge, the teaching unions are in charge, the medical unions, the utterly incompetent, as you've said again and again, the lanyard classes who have proven themselves. Their whole thing is, by the way, we shouldn't have voted for Brexit because the people, we're not clever enough, we're not knowledgeable enough. Let the technocrats be in charge. Well, the technocrats have been in charge for about 20 or 30 years. How's that working for you, everybody? These people are ignorant, incompetent, arrogant, and absolutely out of control. They are the problem in this country because their abject failure to in any way accept reality and facts on every issue, whether it's from trans to illegal immigration or legal migration and the economic costs of that, and whether it's about healthcare, they simply do not deal in reality. And the rest of us living in the real world are paying the penalty.
But with all due respect to politicians, Julia, and everything you said is 110% correct. But with all due respect to the politicians, they might not have the power to do anything about it today, but boy, could they give themselves it. Here's the truth about politicians. They like not being in charge. Oh, yes. They like having civil servants doing it. They like talking about these terms like operational independence and proper process, because that means they have got an excuse come election time. Because the reality is, it ain't that complicated. It
really isn't, is it?
I am into policy, right? I like it, I obsess about it, and I try and explain it to people who have better things to do because they're trying to go out there and earn a living as to what's going on. And 99% of these problems aren't that complicated. Yeah. It's about first principles. And the problem is the principles of the people running this country are wrong. What do you need to do to solve migration? Sort out human rights. Yeah. What do you need to do to sort out crime? Deal with the dangerous criminals, lock them up first.
Oh no, and deal with low-level, zero tolerance, low-level
all
policing.
Of this stuff is bread and butter basics, but politicians have deliberately given over vast swathes of their power to their mates in the lanyard class, who, by the way, many of them deservedly so, because they are responsible for earn far more than the politicians.
Oh yeah.
And every time somebody tries to speak out about it, they are decried as goodness knows what. When ministers tried to do it in the last Conservative government, and I make no excuses excuses for that. They were routinely, all of a sudden, another Home Secretary's got a bullying scandal against them.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, loads of leaks start turning up into certain newspapers from civil servants. There is a determined effort to manage this country into the gutter, and they won't stop until they get there. Do you think they know they're doing it?
Do you think they realise they're doing it?
I think that...
Do they just, again, I know they don't live in the real world, but are they that and utterly separate from the rest of
Julia,
the society that we live in?
I have spent time around these people, and my honest view is they would rather that they were just comfortable, that life was easy,
their lives are good.
that things weren't controversial, and they are sitting there every day, and the only screen they're bothering to refresh is how big is my public sector gold-plated
But the key thing is, again,
now?
this is like the whole thing about getting people, like get asylum seekers, and they call them what they are, illegal migrants, out of hotels into houses of multiple occupancy, because then we won't notice them so much, there won't be anywhere to demonstrate against. Not solving the problem, not solving the actual issue of the people arriving in the country, or the cost of housing them, or the risk they pose to society. I mean, we are looking at, come on, the things that never happened that keep happening in terms of particularly the sexual assaults on young women and girls. But their solution to every problem, whatever the problem is stop talking about it. If we stop talking about it, it goes away. But it doesn't go away because people live with the... Same with the grooming gangs. Yep. Stop talking about it. Stop stirring things up, yep, because then it didn't happen. Well, you can say that to the girl who is being raped at the age of 13 by a 50-year-old man. You can say that, but it's still happening to her. And that's a difficulty. I just find it's so... It's not just incompetence. It's not just not caring. It's immoral. But Julie, it's actually immoral what they're doing.
This generation of senior civil servants, political class, too many in the media,
the Quangos,
all of these people,
you name it, everybody.
In a sense, they are only doing what the generation before them and the generation before that, those that were around 30 years ago, taught them how to do it. And it was fine. Do you know what? When you're Tony Blair and you decide to import a couple of million people from Poland, it doesn't really matter. When these problems started in the early 2000s, it was fine. You could get away with it because it wasn't affecting everyone, and where it was happening, there were pockets of issues and you could deal with that or ignore them. But you can't do that anymore because it's affected every single high street across the length and breadth of Britain. It's affected every single GP surgery. It's affected every single school, in which increasingly vast amounts of resources are going not to help our children read and write or add up or do their maths better, but to just teach basic English to a class full of people that are speaking 22 different languages. And now it's reached the stage where the British public, people talk about the British public having woken up to this. That's just not right. What has happened is actually it has now reached the stage where every single person in this country is facing in their daily lives the deleterious effects of 3 decades of mass migration and mismanagement.
And again, the British public haven't woken up to it. The British public have been aware of it. People aren't stupid. They can see what the changes and the impact on their local communities, indeed. And again, by the way, and it's British people who, black, white and Asian, by the way, is actually, if you look at, the people who are speaking up on this, again, it's become a race thing. It really isn't a race thing. Let me also talk about something else, because again, one of the reasons why, and I've talked about this, but what you want, I'll bore you about all my stories a million times, of course I do. I did my local paper training in the East London Advertiser in Bethnal Green. You can just pretty much see my old patch across the river here. And we had a march that was planned by UKIP in Tower Hamlets, and that was banned by the police because basically it would make local people feel unsafe. It would provoke problems. A lot of people say, well, that's very interesting because actually people feeling unsafe, particularly Jewish people or someone like me who is very much pro-Israel, sorry for being pro the only democracy in the Middle East, silly me, why would I choose them out of all other countries? But we won't feel safe in central London when there's a march every 2 weeks. In fact, it feels like they're more often than that now. They're all the time, all these different marches by people shouting blatantly anti-Semitic things. But apparently police can't ban those. No, apparently they can't, but they can ban a UKIP march. Now, I hold no candle for UKIP or their leadership or anything like that. However, instead, another march was allowed, and it was allowed to go ahead by the police, and this was a march that was I'm sorry, the idea this wasn't intimidating to local people. Now, I know that area, Bethnal Green, huge Muslim Bangladeshi population. There were lots of Bangladeshi flags, there were Palestinian flags, but a large number, largely male, young men, largely masked, hooded men, marching along, shouting slogans, not just pro-Palestine, but actually some really very unpleasant stuff as well. Huge number of them outside near Whitechapel Tube Station on Whitechapel Road in Bethnal Green. That was allowed to go ahead. They were largely dressed in black, hoods up, and demonstrating and basically saying, we're here, do one. Some of the slogans were, I mean, clearly, blatantly criminal in terms of what they were saying, blatantly racist against non-Muslims. Anti-Semitism, absolutely rife. There was a lot. We can show you some of the footage. Some of the things, saying out loud. Now, I'm of the view that I don't want people of any. I don't care whether I agree with them or disagree with them. I don't want anyone wearing a mask on a protest. Yeah. End of. Nothing to discuss. That should be non-negotiable. People are masked. Please go in. End of. This was certainly an intimidating march. Some of the footage was really very intimidating. That was allowed to go ahead by the police, but another march, which could well have sparked violence. Now, here's the thing. No one should react violently to any march of any sort. If you can't cope with people who have different views from you, it has to be peaceful, peacefully marching through your neighbourhood. Maybe you're the problem, not the people marching. Now, I'm of the view that UKIP wanted to march into our hamlets, partly to provoke that reaction, I'm afraid, which is why I think the police were probably right to say, no, do it somewhere else, too provocative. But I don't know why they let this march, this protest go ahead if they were going to ban the UKIP one, because I would say this was also deeply provocative.
This was a hyper-militarised, and I say that genuinely. They all turn up wearing black. They all look exactly the same, as far as I'm concerned.
But in the outfits.
They had coordinated those clothes. And by the way, we banned wearing political uniforms in this country on the streets during protests a long time ago, when black shirts walked through communities designed to stir up hate, which, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not saying everyone there was, but was the intent of a good number of people were saying the following, saying, Bethnal Green, Tower Hamlets, this is our place. Yeah. This is now, and I don't say that they speak for the Muslim community, but they were saying, as far as they're concerned, and I think they were Islamists, people that believe that society should be governed according to Islamic law, Sharia law, they were saying, this is our area, this is our neighbourhood. And
we're in charge.
We're in charge. And shamefully, our police stood by them. And by the way, look for Rahman, the mayor of that area, who was an individual that was banned from being mayor after massive allegations of vote fraud in the Bangladeshi community in particular, sought to enable them. Some of the comments he made out over the past few days are despicable, they're disgraceful. But look, here's the reality, Julia. We do not live in an integrated society. Nope. There is no multiculturalism. It is not. It just doesn't exist, right? Let's be clear. There are now Muslim areas in this country, there are now Jewish areas in this country, there are mixed areas in this country, and there are areas that are as yet untouched by these trends. But I'm almost getting to the stage now where I just think it would just be better if politicians acknowledged it. It would be better.
Stop pretending it's happening. Again, I was very aware of it from a long time ago because I was working on a local paper in an area that had been, East End, proper East End, had been white, and there'd been a large number of Jewish people there in that area, because we know the Cable Street, marches and things, and then had become, within a matter of, a handful of years, overwhelmingly Bangladeshi. And again, but talking about schools that had changed within, while your child had started in year 7, by the time your child left, after GCSEs, the school was a completely different makeup. Now, these are fast changes. No one asked if people were happy with that. And we're also crucially talking about people who arrived, again, from Bangladesh, a very poor country, women largely not speaking English, not able to communicate. So the community, the local community breaks down. There is a massive impact. But here's the thing. Would the police allow a group of white people standing in Whitechapel saying, this is ours. Well, no, we're in control here.
They banned them.
Well, exactly. But and that would be unacceptable. And we would agree that was unacceptable. So And would we agree to any other racial group? Why is it acceptable for a group of Muslim, largely Bangladeshi youths, young men, masked and hooded, wearing black, to... I mean, I'm sorry, don't tell me you weren't deliberately trying to look intimidating.
Yeah, look, we have turned Bethnal Green and that area into basically Belfast. We've got to a stage now where we have, in Belfast, you have Catholic areas, Protestant areas, and you have to spend an awful lot of time managing people marching through different spaces.
And if you say it, then you're a racist. But that's when you discuss facts aren't racist. There is an issue here. But and again, we don't know how representative those people are of the local community, who are just going about their daily lives. They took their kids to school. They, living a normal life. But we have a problem with that kind of aggressive Islamist political ideology. And again, we need to be able to talk about it. You can't deal with it if you can't talk about it. And by the way, countries in the Middle East, and indeed actually, in Bangladesh and Pakistan as well, they are attempting to deal with it. Certainly in the Middle East, they are trying to get on top of this. We're just pretending. Heads, again, lanyard class, heads in the sand, not happening.
Oh, Juliet, the best place in the world to be an extremist Islamist is the
Britain,
UK.
yeah.
It's certainly not in Saudi Arabia. It's certainly not in Dubai, for example. They know you have to get on this stuff as quickly as possible because it's a poisonous ideology that frankly only emerged in the last 100 years. Go look at old pictures of the Middle East.
Absolutely.